All right. Let's talk about some individual card designs.
Yeah, bonuses.
Bonuses. We have. I know Tommy has been itching for this. I think Tommy maybe wishes that the whole thing was individual card design. But you
know
can.
me in cards.
You can go first, Tommy.
So I will say my favorite card in the whole set, and everyone listening will be disappointed, but my favorite card in the whole set is Indomitable Will, which is 1 and a white for a 2/1 flash aura that gives the enchanted creature +1/+2. And I will say the reason why is that white is the color of all colors that most uses combat tricks. Historically, it was green, but green is the color that doesn't need combat tricks at all, because its creatures are big enough to survive combat anyway. But white is the color that's attacking little creatures into big creatures that need some way to win. And white has historically had very few varieties of combat trick. It's really difficult to come up with like 2 different white combat tricks for an aggressive deck.
Yes.
And it's really nice to have this space, which was originally in original Theros, this card was green and gave +2/+2 and cost 3 mana. But it makes way more sense in white because white needs this. So this is white doing something, I mean, new is a stretch. Because there's like feat of resistance and other things to do with counters, but this gives white something that I think white could do regularly as variations on this that would play well. So that was my like thing that I saw that made me smile the most out of the whole set.
You realize it's a reprint, right?
It is not a reprint.
It is a reprint from
Magic Origins.
Oh, it is! Oh my god, it is!
Yeah.
Wow, no, I totally did not realize it was a reprint.
But
well,
you still like it.
I still like it.
Just because it's a reprint does not mean like they clearly recognized this is a thing that should exist in this set. That's still what they probably did was they designed it and they went, wait, this is a reprint? You know what I mean? And,
that's very possible.
Yeah, and that happens, you know?
Yeah, if you tune the numbers at all, the design is completely different. So yeah.
And I agree. I think one of the things that I don't know, this is again hot take, but white should get giant growth. The fact that white is limited to only having a ceiling of like +2 on its power is really limiting to white combat tricks, and it needs more. You know, white might not need the power side of it more, but it really needs to be able to buff toughness, and that often goes hand in hand with power because they really don't like, flip-flopped bonuses sometimes on tricks, and the fact that they could jump up the power better would be better for the white smaller creatures. You know?
I want +2/+3 on a like it's not giant growth because giant growth is so iconic.
Yeah.
But it needs something on its 1 mana tricks other than just indestructible if you do the thing the set cares about. Yeah. In addition to +2/+2, kind of like how they finally gave them the 4/4 for 5 at common. I think it's just the same principle.
Yeah, the +2/+4 was fine. That used to be the standard, although I didn't like that they always printed it in the same set with Titanic growth, so it was just sort of like a joke. But yeah,
Okay, Trevor, do you have a design?
Actually, can I say one more thing about that one?
Yes.
The one thing I want to say was I also think this is good evidence of the weirdness of the fact that they don't do this design more often. Like, it's very clear that they only whip out the flash enchantment technology when an enchantment set is happening, right? And you see it in Ikoria and you see it in Eldraine because they're right next to Theros. But like, they're very weirdly hesitant to do flash buffs, except when it's like absolutely necessary to make something work. Like in Sentinel's Mark, it has addendum, so obviously it needs flash. You know,
I think
very rarely do they actually do it.
I think it's because it's win more. Like if you play this, you probably got somebody, right? Like you're getting somebody, you're blowing them out somehow, and then your creature is also bigger the following turn.
Yeah, I get that they don't do it frequently for that reason, but they do give +1/+1 counters on instance as well, and I think like
that's true.
You know, it's one of those things that like I feel like we could see it more often. I think that if you're gonna have win more on anything, an aura is probably the best place for it. You know what I mean?
That's true.
So, I think it's one of those things that to me it kind of has the sensation of they know they can do it and they hold it back for enchantment sets and things around them when they don't need to, if that makes sense. So my topic, I actually want to talk not just about individual card designs, although I was going to pick a few, or one, But I wanted to talk about the blue-red archetype in Theros Beyond Death, which was blue-red, cast spells on your opponent's turn, which is interesting. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the card, going with the red card, Arena Trickster, which whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and it's a 3 and a red for a 3/3. This is one of those things that, like, actually, I won't even say it first off the bat. I'm curious. What do you two think about the blue-red archetype in the set being cast spells on an opponent's turn?
I mean, I liked it. I didn't end up drafting it that often because the bots like wouldn't let you on Arena. But I think it's a nice... It's orthogonal to the normal sorceries and instants spell slinging archetype that we get, where if you're playing lots of instants, you can also play them on their turn. You know what I mean? And it tells players to do something a little bit different with their cards. It teaches players, if you have instants, make a point of doing it on your opponent's turn. Like, you can do that, like save it to the last possible moment for the bonus. Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I feel like it did a lot of good things. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this set, but I liked it.
So historically, this has been a blue-black mechanic, and I think I more buy it as a blue-black mechanic than a blue-red mechanic, but I don't like... It's obviously blue, because blue is the play things on other people's turns color. Red would not even, I think, have been my next choice after black if one were to do this, but it worked, I think.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was expecting you to say, actually, Tommy. And I'm happy to hear you say those things, Carl, because that's actually a lot of the things I was going to say. I have a weird obsession with the ability of archetypes to teach things, and I'm starting to come around on that a little bit of maybe I'm a little too obsessed with it. But I really like the idea of archetypes that naturally nudge players into learning a couple lessons. And I think casting instants on opponents' turns is a good thing. To understand that you can do that is a good thing. It's one of the things that separates Magic from other card games, so it's good to highlight that.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and I do think that this is odd. One of the things that I'm surprised, I don't think Tommy picked up on it, but Black, right before the set, got upgraded to having Flash secondary. It is now the blue-black mechanic is Flash now. And then the very next set, I think, is Throne of Eldraine, and then they do this set, and it's blue-red instead of blue-black. And it's so interesting because you'd think they'd want to highlight that black gets this now, but they don't. And then in Ikoria, it's blue-black again because they had to make it blue-black again because they needed to care about keywords, and that's the keyword for Flash. So it's interesting that they decided to do it for red for one set in between the two. Do I like it or dislike it? I like it and dislike it at the same time. One of the things that's tricky to me is red is currently characterized as a color that is very reckless and does things immediately. Instants are the exact opposite of that. Instants, you want to save them and you want to hold on to them until a good time to use them, and you typically don't run them out ASAP. And this one tells you do not run it out ASAP because it doesn't even want you to cast on your turn.
But it does want you to cast it. Like, you're going to lose your bonus if you don't do it on that next turn, which is why I think it can still work in red. But
these bonuses are not things that are typically time limited. They typically are things that are patient, right? Like, yes.
Well, you lose your window if you don't do it. Like, you're not rewarded to hold up your counterspell until they cast something. They want you to cast a combat trick on their turn or to save your removal spell for their turn. Like, things that you would be doing on your main step during your turn to just wait. And if you don't do it, then you miss out. And that does feel red to me.
I think it's an extension of red. I think that the ability... I agree that that window of opportunity that you describe is a little reddish. Like, this wants you to be casting a spell on each opponent's turn, every one of their turns, which does feel a little more red, but it's extending the space of red. And I think that's a good thing. I think that red deserves to not be the color of recklessly and immediately doing things and only doing that, right? I think red is allowed to think ahead a little bit and is allowed to hold back a little bit. And I think what you've described of, I want to hold back until your turn, but I want to do something every one of your turns. I think that is a red way to handle thinking ahead, right? And I think that is a red way to handle patience, in that it's like that little kid who's thrumming with energy and is struggling to contain it and is going to explode any moment, but they are still holding on just for long enough. You know what I mean? And it's weird. I think it's a very odd choice for red, because red only gets this with instants and with the enchantments that have flash. Red does not get flash very often, and I don't think it got it on a single red card, like creature card in the set. And that makes it feel different than the blue cards, which tend to have flash for this instead. And they focus a little more on the creature half of the equation and the enchantment half of the equation to make the two halves of the archetype feel different, which is cool. I think it's, again, weird spot for it. I think they did it because of the omens happening to have flash, and
yeah, that does help. And the flash auras.
Flash auras too, exactly. They're like, hey, we're gonna have to do a lot of flash for the set. Maybe we can do something about that. And then they looked at blue black and thought they might feel too similar as two halves of the archetype and so on. But it's odd. It is an interesting oddity, and I just wanted to kind of highlight that it's both really cool for red and very unusual for red, and I think that's a good thing in the end, but it just has that weird tension to it.
Yeah. Cool. The card I want to talk about was Sweet Oblivion. And this, I think, is my favorite card in the set. It's an escape card. It just mills any player 4. And then the escape 3 and a blue and exile 4 cards. And I think this has a lot of lenticular design, because you see this card and you're like, oh, it's a mill card. You just mill them with it. But to replay it, you actually need to be milling yourself. And it perfectly allows you to just mill your whole deck with Sweet Oblivion, because it puts 4 cards into your yard. If they're not the cards you're looking for, you can use it to cast it again later. But then, if it gets to a point where you've gotten all the resources you need from your graveyard, you can then turn it into a win condition instead and start targeting them. It's a very interesting design with Escape in particular, because Escape is about recursion and doing the same thing over and over again. And one way that this design sings is that you don't want to do the same thing over and over again. You want to fuel yourself a little bit so you can cast it on them, and hold it back until you know you can win. Like, you've got a bunch of cards in your yard and you have 8 mana and you can mill them 8. Or, if you're all out mill, you can just start milling them aggressively. So I really like the design of that card. I think it does really interesting things with the space of Escape. And yeah, I just like how lenticular it is. And it's nice, like, this can be kind of a dirtly format, because they want you to be trading a lot and have creatures that you're replaying a lot, and you have the mana and the cards in your yard to do that. And so sometimes I would draft a really slow deck that just gained lots of life and gummed up the board, and I would just win with Sweet Oblivion, which was very satisfying from a draft perspective. So yeah, that's mine. Tommy, your turn.
I want to talk about Thrix, the Sudden Storm.
Ooh.
So I'm going to read this in a weird order, but I'm going to start with the ability: spells you cast with converted mana cost 5 or greater cost 1 less to cast and can't be countered. And so I want to think about, okay, what kind of card do I want that to be on? What do I want the mana cost of that card to be? Well, I'd say if you want it to play it on curve and you want that ability to be relevant, then you'd need this to cost 3, because you need to play it on 3, play a land, have 4 lands, and then play your 5-drop. That would have been ideal. But what does it actually cost? It actually costs 5, and it helps you play 5 drops, which is already a little weird. But then you add on the fact that it has flash for reasons, And sort of like the thing you read when you look at the can't be countered and the flash is you think, okay, I'm supposed to play this in response to them countering one of my 5-drops.
Oh no.
Except there's no way you can possibly do that because it costs 5 and you're playing a 5-drop, so that doesn't really make sense. But then on top of all of that, it's also a 4/5 flyer for 5 mana. And so I feel like at the point where you're printing a 5 mana 4/5 flyer with flash, it just doesn't matter what the other ability does, because every 5 mana 4/5 flyer, whether it has flash or not, is the same magic card, because it just you play it and either they kill it or you kill them. So I feel like they had this ability and they had some potential, but then they put the pieces together in such a way that this has become a card where it has this line of text that's just never going to matter, and the line of text that's never going to matter is the only interesting thing about the card. So these are the nitty-gritty things that I pick up on there, that I complain about on these cards. But I want this to cost 3 mana and have different stats and these abilities, and then it would be way more interesting.
Yeah, just more like internally consistent, or like to help itself succeed.
Clearly, it was a companion for Ikoria, so it had to converted mana cost 5.
I guess. Oh no.
Yeah, it's an oddball. Tommy talked about this to me in the past, and I explained a bit about the flash and all that. I think that stuff makes sense, but yeah, it being a 4/5 flyer, like if it was smaller, you would be more incentivized to use the ability, which is the fun part of the card. But now it's just like beat them in the face. So the fun part of the card is kind of trinket text.
Yeah, that's
Block
fair.
their 4/4 with it by flashing it in, and then beat them in the face.
Yeah, I mean that's how it plays in limited. That's what it does.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time imagining this being good in constructed. Like, maybe.
It's an EDH card, I think.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Kinda. I think that's what it's meant to be doing. I think it's fun. It's going to be in my Sphinx deck because Sphinxes love it. But you know.
All right, Trevor. Do you have a card?
Yeah, Hateful Eidolon.
Ooh, I was going to pick that
it's
one.
a 1 mana enchantment creature spirit, lifelink. Whenever an enchanted creature dies, draw a card for each aura you control that was attached to it. It's a 1 power, 2 toughness. It's your boy, Trevor Tragedy, and I say this would have been in my Greek Tragedy set. Because this cares about auras in a way that is compatible with original Theros, but you see, it also cares about auras in a way that sells tragedy. Now, the white-black archetype, which is auras, works with both pacifism and dead weight, as well as heroic auras. So the cool, ironic twist, which dramatic, tragic irony is also part of Greek tragedy, is that now the very mechanisms of heroic are used for tragedy. And I think that would have been really cool. I like this card a lot. It and Dawn of Angel both have a really cool way of caring about auras that is unique, which hits upon the thing that you were saying, that we needed to care about auras and enchantments in a way that was unique to auras and enchantments.
Yeah.
This is a way that's unique to it. And it's a way that the original Theros did not explore, which is the ability to enchant your opponent's creatures. Bestow did that really weird cycle that nobody liked, but this one does it in a way that actively rewards you for casting the auras you already wanted to be casting, which is stuff like Deadweight and Pacifism, the auras that are usually more acceptable because they removal instead of risky bonuses. And I think the fact that it can interface with both is a really transition point to a thing that...
We're losing you, Trevor.
Oh, did you lose me a lot for that?
Just a little bit at the end.
Okay. Where did you start losing me?
Like one sentence, maybe half a sentence at the end. So we're probably fine.
Yeah, that was probably anyway. I do that a lot, so no worries.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing about it making you care about enchantments, behaving the way that enchantments behave. So I like that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a line of text. This card exiles cards from a graveyard, and when you do it, you gain 2 life, and your opponent loses 2 life. What color is this card?
It sounds very black, but I'm guessing it's not black.
Yeah, it was a little too leading there. It's red-green, obviously, because
Closes, yeah.
you know the icon of the red-green color combination in the pantheon of devotion, the color matters mechanic gods. So yeah, I was like, oh, cool. It makes sense that there is a god that was locked up with the Titans that needed to be replaced. Like, they're tying up loose ends. Awesome new character. Okay, she looks kind of weird. What's her deal? Destiny. Okay, how's Red-Green Destiny? There's a whole blogatog, month-long argument about that. But then just what she does not feel red-green at all. It just feels like a very tortured way of them being like, how can red-green care about the graveyard? Well, maybe if they have this modular thing where they care about what you exile, and it might give you mana, or it could, do two things that happen when you put red and green together, which is dealing damage, and green can gain life, and hey, look, those mirror each other. I don't know. So all that logic is logical, and it makes sense in pieces, but there's no way that I just think this is a horrible red-green god design because it doesn't feel red-green at all. And anytime it was played against me or I played with it in draft, is like, oh, you have the mono-black finisher creature that is actually just red-green, I just really dislike how that design came together there. It feels like they're breaking the pie in the way that custom Magic designers do, where it's like, oh, if this color can do this thing, that color can do this other thing. If you put them together, it can do something that neither color should be able to do by itself.
I feel similarly. I think this started as just them saying again, like, this is the enchantment set. What's an iconic enchantment? Oh, sulfuric vortex. We need to print a sulfuric vortex. Oh, we can't plant a mono red sulfuric vortex. That's too good. And I think R&D for many, many years has had this bizarre notion that red-green wants to be an aggressive color pair, even though I don't know that red-green has ever been an aggressive color pair. But if you look at the mechanics they try and put in red-green, they really want it. They want red-green aggro to happen. And so I think this was their way of saying, like, well, maybe this way we can make red-green aggro happen. That's my aggro card? Of course it's an aggro card. It's 3 mana, deal 2 damage to everyone. It's Sulfuric Vortex. It doesn't get any more aggro than Sulfuric Vortex.
I don't know if I agree.
But it can also ramp you. But the problem is, when are you ramping with it? I don't know. If you have cards in your graveyard already, are you likely to need ramp? I don't know. Like, so, depending on what's in your hand, yes. But I'm
your graveyard.
That's true.
A graveyard.
That's true.
In fact, I believe the intent is to exile your opponent's stuff.
Yeah, but if you want to build around this, like, you want to make sure you have ways to get stuff into your yard, right? But in practice...
Yeah, the idea of the card is that she is removing the possibility of escape, you see.
Yeah, but there's like 12 cards that already do that in this set.
Yeah, I know. It's odd. I'm going to be the odd boy out. I think what you're saying about color mismatch is okay. You're talking about individual single colors. Blue should not destroy creature because it can bounce a creature than mill. But blue-black can destroy creatures, right? And white-red gets War Leader's Helix, even though black also gets War Leader's Helix, because white can gain life and red can deal damage. You'll notice... if you had said you gain 2 life and and this deals 2 damage, it wouldn't have felt as black anymore, because in black you deal the damage, then you steal the life. So they very deliberately wrote it this way, even though it's the opposite order of the mana symbols.
And that makes me more mad, because it means that they knew it. Like, they knew. If you just change the order it's written in, but it still does the same thing, that doesn't make it okay. Like, this is one of the most iconic things that Black does. They have it in every set, almost, often a common, some kind of life steal, life leeching thing. And saying something that's emblematic of the red-green color combination can do that every turn, and not just like a small amount. You're not draining for 1, but for 2. Like, there's very iconic black cards that do this. I really don't like that.
I would be so much happier with that.
I agree, it's weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
I would agree, it's iconic black. It's also iconic red white.
Yeah.
Does it really need to also be red green?
Exactly.
It's just mud.
I'm not saying I like it in red green. I'm saying that it's not a color pie violation. Or just is really freaking weird. And
Okay,
they
that's fair.
tried
Not a
to-
violation, except in feel, which in
Yeah,
some ways is more important.
In final sensation, it's weird. In red white, it works because the flavor is very clear as well. Like it's inspiring damage. When it's lightning helix, it's inspiring. War leader's helix is better, I think, because you deal the damage and then yay, your army's happy, all that stuff. You know. In this case, it's weird. I agree. I don't like it. To me, I'm not exactly a fantastic, constructed player or anything, but to me, this doesn't like an aggro deck. I can be used for aggro, but the gaining of mana, the life, and the damage, to me, that reads as I am establishing a clock. If I can do this 10 times, I win, ideally, and I am adding some distance for you to beat me, right? This is making it harder for you to become the beatdown. And I can gain some mana to be able to cast some other things, I guess. I agree that part's really weird. But I feel like this is meant to be an inevitable feeling. I think it's meant to feel like I am inevitably winning, you are inevitably losing, and that's kind of meant to feel like this.
The classic red-green feel.
Right. It's a
No.
different... It's aggro. Either it's aggro, which
It's
is
white-black.
green,
I don't know.
or it's white-black or red-white or whatever.
Even
If you first
Destiny.
Sulfuric Vortex, what deck are you drafting?
See, I think in this case, it's not meant for draft. I think it's meant to feel like a different direction for red-green. It's meant to be a more inexorable red-green. I don't know.
You're very generous.
I'm generous here. Very
Yeah.
generous here. I like the final card, to be clear. But I think it was intended to portray a different dimension of red-green than we typically get.
That's
think
true.
the
Everything
fact
about
that
her
they
feels
chose-
different.
I think it's meant to. I think it's meant to.
Yeah. Like,
I
I agree.